Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're heading back to 1947, the year flying saucers entered our vocabulary. You know the phrase, but do you know where it came from?
Yeah, it's interesting actually. It all really kicks off with, just one event. This pilot sees something unusual while he's flying near Mount Rainier, and boom, people can't get enough of UFOs after that.
Exactly. It really captures the imagination, doesn't it? We've got some great sources to help us break it all down, including stuff from the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum and History.com, of course. But let's start with Kenneth Arnold. June 24th, 1947, that's the day things get interesting.
And the thing is with Arnold, you're not talking about some amateur, stargazer or something. This guy's a serious pilot. Had over 4,000 hours of flight time under his belt. Even worked with search and rescue units. So when someone like that says they saw something strange, well, people are going to listen.
They sure are. So set the scene for us. What was Arnold doing up there in his Cal Air A2 that day?
Well, he was hoping to find this downed military aircraft. There was a reward out for it. Figured he'd do some searching while he was up there.
Makes sense. So he's flying along, and then what?
Well, that's when things get a little weird. He sees these flashes, almost like reflections, out the corner of his eye.
What, like from another plane?
At first, he probably thought so. But then there are more flashes, and that's when he realizes, okay, this isn't normal. This isn't just like sunlight glinting off another aircraft.
So what does he actually see?
Okay, so he sees 9 objects, shiny, no tails, just these circular shapes, flying in a V formation.
A V formation, like birds.
Yeah, kind of like that, like a flock of, well, something. He estimated each one was about 100 feet across. And get this.
Okay, I'm hooked. What's the get this part?
These things were moving, seriously fast. He calculated they were going somewhere between 1,200 and 1,700 miles per hour.
Wow, that's faster than anything at the time, right?
Oh yeah, this is years before Chuck Yeager breaks the sound barrier. So if this was an aircraft, it was something nobody had ever seen before, seriously advanced.
Yeah, no kidding. So what else? Did he say anything else about how they looked or how they were moving?
Oh yeah, he described their movement as like the tail of a Chinese kite. They were flipping and weaving all over the place.
That's a pretty vivid description. But, and here's where things get a little fuzzy, Arnold never actually used the term flying saucer to describe what he saw, right?
Nope, not at first anyway. That comes a little later.
So how did that phrase get attached to his sighting? I'm guessing those reporters had something to do with it. Always the reporters.
You got it. He does these interviews with a couple of reporters, Bill Bickett and Nolan Skiff. They worked for the East Oregonian newspaper, and they kind of latched on to that saucer-like part of his description.
Oh, so that's where it comes from.
Yeah. And then, before you know it, saucer-like aircraft turns into flying saucers in their articles. And, well, you know how it goes. It's a catchy phrase.
It takes off. Literally.
Exactly. Wire services pick it up, radio broadcasts, the whole 9 yards. So suddenly everyone's talking about flying saucers.
Yeah.
But it, well, it wasn't exactly what Arnold had intended.
Right. I bet he wasn't thrilled about that.
Later on, he actually talked about how frustrated he was by the whole thing. All the misquotes, the misinformation, the whole media circus. It wasn't what he signed up for.
That makes sense. I mean, he just wanted to explain what he saw, not become like the poster child for alien encounters or whatever.
Right. But that's kind of the thing about the media sometimes, isn't it? Once that story's out there, it's hard to control the narrative.
So true. So if he didn't use the term flying saucers, what did he say they look like? Like, what was his actual description?
Okay, so later on, he actually clarifies things a bit. He even makes a sketch. Says they were more crescent-shaped, rounded in the front, and pointed at the back. Almost like a shoe heel, he said.
Like a shoe heel. Interesting. There's actually an aircraft in the National Air and Space Museum's collection that kind of reminds me of that description. The Vought V-173, they called it the Flying Pancake.
Ah, the Flying Pancake.
Yeah.
That was a unique aircraft, definitely ahead of its time. Designed to take off and land from aircraft carriers, in a short distance.
Yeah.
It had this flat, almost circular wing shape.
Yeah, so maybe that's what Arnold saw, like a flying pancake, and everyone just got a little carried away with the whole flying saucer thing.
It's possible, sure.
Yeah.
But there are a few problems with that theory. For one, the Flying Pancake was still a prototype in '47, and its flights were pretty hush-hush, top secret stuff. And it still doesn't explain the crazy speed that Arnold described.
Good point. So the mystery continues.
Oh, yeah. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Arnold's sighting, it's like the first domino to fall.
Okay, so we've got a credible witness, a strange sighting, a media frenzy. What happens next? Where does this all lead?
Well, this is where things get really interesting because
Yeah.
this is the start of what we now call ufology, the study of UFOs. Like, it becomes a whole field of research with people devoting their lives to trying to figure out these unexplained phenomena.
Wow. So Arnold's sighting didn't just create a catchy phrase, it sparked a whole movement.
Pretty much. Things are about to get even more mysterious.
Yeah.
It totally did.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just like, scientists and researchers getting into it. This whole flying saucer thing, it really took hold of the public imagination.
Yeah, you see it everywhere. I mean, think about all those old sci-fi movies from that era, all the books, the comics. They were obsessed with those disc shapes.
Oh, totally. It's like Arnold's sighting kind of flipped a switch in our brains. Suddenly everyone's looking up at the sky, wondering what else might be out there.
It's that classic fear of the unknown, but also a fascination with it, right? Like, are we alone? Arnold's experience made that question feel a lot more real for a lot of people.
Definitely. And those flying saucer designs, I mean, they were just so cool. All sleek and silver, glowing orbs, perfect for those stories about aliens with crazy advanced technology.
Oh, yeah. Those designs were iconic. But beyond the fictional stuff, there were people who genuinely wanted answers. They wanted to understand what Arnold saw, what it all meant.
Right. That's where ufology really takes off. You start to see all these groups popping up dedicated to researching UFO sightings, documenting everything.
And it wasn't just like, fringe groups or conspiracy theorists. You had serious people getting involved. Scientists, pilots, even people in the government were taking notice.
Oh, yeah. And I think part of that was this growing distrust of authority that was happening at the time, especially after World War II.
Right. People were starting to question official narratives. And the idea that the government might be covering up UFO sightings, well, that was a hot topic.
Yeah. Conspiracy theories were running wild. Some of them are still around today, actually. And then you have the Roswell incident just a few weeks after Arnold's sighting. That just poured fuel on the fire.
Roswell, the big one. Didn't the military try to say it was just a weather balloon?
At first, yeah. But a lot of people weren't buying it.
It became a symbol of government secrecy, like they were hiding the truth about aliens. Even though they later admitted it was actually a top-secret surveillance project, not an alien spacecraft.
It's crazy how much damage a lack of transparency can do, Just leads to more speculation and distrust.
So to recap, we have this credible sighting, this super catchy phrase, flying saucers, this whole ufology movement emerging, and a growing distrust of authority figures. It's like a recipe for a cultural phenomenon.
Oh, totally. It was the perfect storm. And it had a huge impact on how we think about aliens even today. I mean, you can't talk about UFOs without thinking about flying saucers.
Right. It's like the image is burned into our collective consciousness. And what about Kenneth Arnold? He kind of got swept up in all of this, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. Whether he wanted to or not, he became the face of the flying saucer craze.
Did he ever, try to set the record straight?
He did. He spent a lot of time trying to clarify what he saw, separate fact from fiction. But it was tough. The story had already taken on a life of its own.
It's kind of sad, in a way. He just wanted to share his experience, and it turned into this whole other thing.
It happens. Sometimes a story, especially a good one, just takes over, It taps into something deep within us, some primal fear or fascination. It's hard to control where it goes once it's out there.
That's true. But hey, maybe that's part of what makes Arnold's story so interesting, right? It's a story that makes us think, makes us question, makes us look beyond the everyday. It makes us embrace the mystery of the unknown.
Exactly. It reminds us that there's still so much we don't know about the universe, and there's something really powerful in that.
There is. Speaking of mysteries, though, there's something that I've always wondered about this whole flying saucer thing.
Oh, do tell. I'm intrigued.
Well, what if, and this might sound a little out there, but what if Arnold's sighting and all the flying saucer hype that came after it actually influenced real-life aircraft design?
Whoa. Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
You're talking about those sleek, futuristic aircraft designs that started popping up in the mid-20th century. Like, maybe those early UFO reports sparked something in the minds of engineers and designers.
Exactly. Before 1947, aircraft were pretty conventional, your typical airplane shapes with wings and tails. But after Arnold's sighting, it's like everything changed.
You're right. When you look at some of those experimental aircraft designs from the late 40s and early 50s, they do have that flying saucer vibe, rounded fuselages, blended wings. There was definitely a shift towards a more futuristic aesthetic.
It's like those flying saucer stories, even if they weren't real, planted a seed. Maybe they helped push the boundaries of what people thought was possible in terms of aircraft design.
It's a fascinating thought. I mean, we can't say for sure if there's a direct connection, but it's fun to think about, right?
Totally. So, after going deep on this flying saucer phenomenon, what's the biggest takeaway? What should our listeners be thinking about?
For me, it's a reminder of how powerful a story can be. One event, like Arnold's sighting, can capture the public imagination and create these ripple effects that go way beyond the original event. It can spark movements, inspire art, maybe even influence technological advancements. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
And it reminds us to be critical thinkers, too, right? To question what we see and hear, especially in today's world where information spreads so fast. We have to be careful about separating fact from fiction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's also okay to embrace the mystery, to keep that sense of wonder alive. We might never know for sure what Kenneth Arnold saw that day near Mount Rainier, but his experience and the whole flying saucer legacy, they remind us to look up at the sky with curiosity. Never lose that sense of awe about the universe.
That's a great point.
Mhm.
So to wrap up our deep dive, here's something to think about. If Arnold's sighting wasn't a misidentified aircraft, a weird weather thing, or even that flying pancake, what could it have been? The answer, like the universe itself, is a big, beautiful mystery.
Yeah, it really does. And that's what I love about this whole topic. Even after all these years, all the research, we still don't have all the answers. It keeps that sense of mystery alive.
Exactly. And that's what makes ufology so fascinating. It's not always about finding the answers. It's about the search itself.
Yeah.
Challenging our assumptions about, what's out there.
It's like this big puzzle with missing pieces. And every new sighting, every new theory, it adds another layer. Makes you want to keep digging.
Totally.
Yeah.
Sometimes the journey is more important than the destination. You got to keep an open mind, be willing to consider different perspectives, and, admit that we don't know everything.
When you put it like that, it almost sounds philosophical. Like studying UFOs is really about studying ourselves, our limits. Yeah. There's definitely an element of that. I mean, UFOs, they force us to confront the edge of what we know, to accept that maybe there are things out there that we just can't explain.
Yeah, like our science, our technology, it might not be enough to understand everything.
Right. It's humbling, but it's also really exciting. Think about it. There's still so much out there to discover, to learn. The universe is huge, full of mysteries.
And possibilities. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into flying saucers, what's the main thing you'd want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I'd say, remember Kenneth Arnold. Remember how one guy's story, one sighting, could turn into this global thing? And how it really made people think differently about, everything.
It shows you how powerful an idea can be, right?
Yeah.
Even if we never know for sure what he saw.
Exactly. So yeah, keep looking up, keep questioning, and never lose that sense of wonder. You never know what you might see out there.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought. If Arnold's sighting wasn't a plane, wasn't a weather thing, wasn't even that flying pancake, was it? Maybe we'll never know. But hey, that's part of the fun, isn't it? Thanks for joining us for another deep dive, everyone.